Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today, and a warm welcome wherever you are to our 2024 MSCA Doctoral Networks webinar. My name is Jane Carrigan, and I'm one of two MSCA national contact points for the MSCA in Ireland, based in the Irish Marie Skłodowska-Curie office. The office is supported by the Irish Research Council and operates under a joint partnership with the Irish Universities Association. Our mission is to support the research community in Ireland across all disciplines and sectors in both applying for MSCA funding and in implementing MSCA projects. We do this in a number of ways, including promoting MSCA programs, through information events, through workshops, and of course, webinars like this one. And indeed by providing more hands-on support, including pre-review of proposals being led or coordinated by an Ireland-based organisation. Before I go on any further, I want to mention also that we have closed captioning available today, and you can alter the size of those captions by clicking on the CC button at the bottom of your screen. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available through our website, and all those registered will receive a link to the recording when it is ready. So you're all very welcome again to the webinar on the EU's Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions Doctoral Networks funding call. The Doctoral Networks call used to be known as ITN, but under Horizon Europe, the action has been rebranded, and the 2024 Doctoral Networks call will open shortly on the 29th of May. Today's webinar is for staff from both academic and non-academic organisations, and we're really delighted to see so many of you with us today. There will be a Q&A session after the presentations, so I invite you during the session to post any questions you may have onto the Q&A function, and we will address as many of them as we can. And many thanks to those of you who've already submitted questions at registration. My colleague, Dr. Yvonne Halpin, a fellow national contact point and also national delegate, is also with us today, and will place our contact details and some other resources too in the chat function. Thank you, Yvonne. So that brings us to our guest speakers today. We are delighted to be joined by our panel, which includes Dr. Julien Giordani from the Research Executive Agency in the European Commission. We will then have Professor Sarah Hudson from University of Limerick, who is the first of our case studies. And following Professor Hudson's presentation, we will have our second case study presented by Professor Debbie Ging from Dublin City University. We'll begin with our first speaker. Julien, I invite you to share your slides while I introduce you. Julien joins us from the Doctoral Networks unit in the Research Executive Agency. After obtaining a PhD in human genetics, he joined the nanotechnology unit of DG RTD in the European Commission. Following this, in 2009, he joined the REA in the Security Research Unit before joining the MSCA ITN unit in 2016 as panel coordinator for the ITN European Industrial Doctorates, followed by panel coordinator for the Life Science panel. And he's worked for the last number of years as call coordinator for the MSCA Doctoral Networks call. It's clear that Julien has extensive experience of the call, and we're very grateful for your participation here today, Julien. Over to you.
Thank you, Jane. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I think it's still morning in Ireland. So good morning from Brussels. So as Jane explained, I'm the call coordinator for the Doctoral Networks call that will open in about 21 days until the 27th of November. So you're pretty early in your preparation, and I'm going to walk you through what doctoral networks are, the few changes we're having this year for the 2024 call compared to the 2023 call. I hope the closed caption is able to pick my accent and translate it in proper English. So without further ado, let's start. So a brief overview about the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Action Work Program, because we are one of many different topics or funding schemes, and then a bit more into the doctoral networks, and then I'll walk you through the eligibility conditions, the funding mechanisms, how these proposals are evaluated, and the number of resources you can go through to get additional information. So basically, MSCA in general is really about training and the human capital development. So it's about researchers training, skills and careers development at all stages of career. So we have the doctoral networks, that's the earliest career of researchers development. Then you also have the postdoctoral fellowship, that's another call. And then you have the staff exchange, that's for established researchers and for transfer of knowledge between different entities. One thing that characterizes MSCA is also the bottom-up approach. So there is no predefined topics. You can submit a proposal in any field of science, and as long as the research is excellent, it has the potential to be funded. There is a strong focus on mobility, mobility between countries, mobility between disciplines, between sectors. That's a big thing in MSCA. And through that, there's also some policy objectives behind to foster attractive working and employment conditions, to have a structuring impact on the different entities that participate in the MSCA actions, and to enhance the collaboration between with the industry and the SMEs with the academic sector. So that's where we are in the bigger picture of Horizon Europe. We are in Pillar 1, Excellent Science. So you probably heard about the European Research Council. We are the MSCA actions. Research infrastructures are also within this pillar. So this is excellent science. This is bottom-up compared to Pillar 2 or 3 that are more targeted to predefined topics. Within MSCA, so I told you, we are doctoral networks. I told you about the postdoctoral fellowships. There's a staff exchange as well, co-found. And you see here that, basically there's one call per year, and you have the 2024 call. And so the deadline is 27th of November. And we have a budget, an increase in budget since the UK became associated for the 2024 call to Horizon Europe of over 600 million euros. So that's quite an increase compared to last year, where we had something about 450. So we had less than 500 million, and now we have a bit more than 600 million euros. So quite an increase in the budget. So what is a doctoral network in a nutshell? So a doctoral network is a consortium of entities, universities, industries, research centers, SMEs, who are going to devise an overall coherent research program, and also individual research projects for a number of fellows, which we call, whom we call doctoral candidates. So PhD students, basically, that the consortium will recruit in the future, meaning after the project has started. So just to make it clear, because here and there we have this confusion that this is not a call for an individual person who wants to embark into a doctoral program. That's an institution-driven network that in the future will then, if funded, will recruit the doctoral candidates in order to perform their individual project. So the idea is that there should be benefits, of course, for the doctoral candidates who are going to do their thesis within your institutions, and there should be also benefits from the participating organizations through the the coordinated work between different institutions. The idea is to train doctoral candidates, but also to train them to be creative, entrepreneurial, innovative, and resilient. What that means is go a bit beyond the traditional, well, there's less and less traditional PhDs, but if I think back of mine, it's typically you're recruited, I mean, the PhD is recruited from the pool of master's degree students you have in the university, and most of the time you have your research work in the lab. There's not much in terms of additional training that you have. You have training through research, but the idea is now to offer training in research related, but also other competencies that will increase the long-term employability of the fellows within the academia, but also outside the academia. So the idea is to also focus on the transferable skills through formal training, but also through intersectoral secondments, so that the fellows see different ways of working. The idea is that they should develop a career development plan with you. They should be properly supervised. And the idea also is through this cooperation between the different entities to have more cooperation and knowledge transfers between the sectors and between the disciplines, and have a regular feedback of research results into teaching and education. So that's the bigger picture. So that's what's in it for the fellows and for the institution. What's in it for Europe? So the idea is to strengthen the human capital base of Europe by training, obviously, highly skilled doctoral candidates, improve the attractiveness of the researcher careers in Europe through, well, better working and employment conditions, foster the circulation of talent and knowledge. All of these things I already told you about, and also the idea of sustainable cooperation between the organization and foster the culture of open science. Just to note that the open science is not only restricted to MSCAs. This is something for the whole of Horizon Europe, this need of open science. So what are doctoral networks? So as I said, it's a multi-beneficiary or multi-institution action that is going to set up a doctoral program. And there are three types of doctoral networks. There's the standard type. We call it standard just to make sure we understand each other, but it's only called a doctoral network. You have the industrial doctorate. As the name suggests, there's a strong focus on the non-academic sector involvement in these types of doctorates. And there are also the joint doctorates, and the joint doctorates have more of a structuring effect with a joint collaborations between institutions leading to a joint double or multiple doctoral degree. There's more joint activities because it's mandatory to have a joint selection and supervision of fellows, and there should be a pre-agreement for joint degrees already at the proposal stage. There's a template for that in the proposal template. So this recapitulates it. So you have these three modes of implementations or types of actions: doctoral networks, industrial doctorates, and joint doctorates. Now, what you need to know is that when you submit a proposal, you have to submit it in one of the 8 scientific panels from MSCA. It's the same panels across all the MSCA actions. So you have, there's 8 of them. So you have chemistry, economics, life sciences, engineering, environment, mathematics, physics, and social sciences. I hope I didn't forget one of those. And what you need to know is that these 3 types of actions, so doctoral networks, industrial doctorates, or joint doctorates, they compete together within the same scientific panel. So back in Horizon 2020, you had a dedicated panel for industrial doctorates or joint doctorates. It's no longer the case since Horizon Europe. You can have any of these types of actions that compete between themselves within the scientific panel, and there will be one budget per scientific panel. All right. So novelties compared to last year. So one novelty is, so I told you that the overall budget is increased because of the association with the United Kingdom. There is also the increase in the unit cost. So basically to factor in the inflation, the living allowances, meaning the salary of the fellow has increased to 4,010 euros. this is the gross amount. So typically a PhD student doesn't receive more than 4,000 euros. This is a gross amount. So it's, you have social securities, taxes, and everything inside. And the mobility allowance as well has increased to 710 euros per eligible person month. Resubmission restrictions. So this is not really new, because in the past you already had the fact that if you submitted the proposal, let's say in 2022, and you scored less than 80%, because it's 80 out of 100, then you could not submit the same proposal the year after, okay? But what's new now is that we have further defined what is a resubmission. So basically, any proposal involving at least 70% of the same institutions as in the previous year. If this previous proposal received less than 80%, then we will assess whether it's a resubmission or not. And we can also ask evaluators to assess that. And then the eligibility committee will decide whether this proposal should have been resubmitted or not. Okay, there is a self-declaration that you have to fill in when you submit a proposal to say whether it's a resubmission or not. But irrespective of the fact that you declared it or not, if it's the proposal with 70% of the consortium is the same, and assessing the content of the proposal, this is the same proposal as in the previous years, then it could be declared ineligible. So it's really about the 70% of the consortium. This is the novelty. And there's a bit more flexibility for the joint doctorates conditions. So in the past, for the joint doctorates, you needed at least, so the joint double or multiple degree should have been in the past recognized in at least 2 EU member states or associated countries, and now it's recognized in at least 1 EU member state or Horizon Europe associated country. All right, so you could have a triple degree, for instance. I'm just inventing now, with Ireland, I don't know, the US and Japan, for instance, whereas it would not have been possible last year. Moving on, for the 2024 features. So this hasn't changed. Basically, if you submit a standard doctoral networks, you can request up to 540 person month, right? With each fellow having a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 36 months of fellowship. So that means that these fellows that you will recruit, if all of them get 36 months of contract with the institutions, you can have up to 15 PhD students times 36, that's 540. The project, so the project of each fellow will be maximum 36 months, but the overall project, so the doctoral network, its duration is up to 48 months. So you have basically, that means you have basically up to 1 year to recruit all the fellows before they can start working. Fellows can go on secondment. They can go on secondment worldwide. It's not limited to Europe, but there is a limitation in the duration of the secondments. They cannot go on secondment for more than 1/3 of their fellowship duration. So if they have a fellowship of 36 months, they can go on secondment maximum 12 months. For joint doctorates, same thing, 540 person months. Since last year, each fellow can have a maximum duration of 48 months, so that's 4 years. Consequently, you can have an overall network duration of maximum 60 months, or 1 year extra. And there is no limitation for secondments for joint doctorates. You can go above this 1/3. Each fellow need to be enrolled in a joint double or multiple PhD in at least 1 member state or associated countries among the PhD awarding entities. There should be joint admission, selection, training, supervision, and governance for all fellows. And there is a mandatory letter of pre-agreement that you have to fill in at the proposal stage. If you look at the template, the proposal template, you will find this, this letter of pre-agreement. And finally, you have the industrial doctorates. So here again, 540 person months, fellowship up to 36 months. Now, in industrial doctorates, each fellow needs to spend at least 50% of their time in the non-academic sector. Okay, that's a requirement. And there is no limitation for secondment. So you could have a fellow recruited by a university, for instance, and spending 50, 60% of their time as a secondment in the non-academic sector. That's possible. There should be joint supervision of the fellows by the academic and the non-academic sector. I would just like to point to something important is the definition of academic and non-academic sector. Basically, whether your institution is in the academic or the non-academic sector, this is basically depending on the validation of your entity within the system. So the system will automatically flag you as academic or non-academic. This is important because in the past we've had institutions who thought they were non-academic, whereas actually they were academic, and vice versa. So it's important to really check that and check the definition. All of that is in the work program, of course, and there's also some something in the guide for applicant. Just to tell you, because you're very early in these preparations, the guide for applicant is not yet online. It's going to be online. I mean, the updated one, it's going to be online in 1 or 2 weeks, but the one that you can see in the funding and tender portal right now, it's still the old one. All right. Okay, and you have the icons showing at the end of the slide. So talking about academic and non-academic, basically academic sector means for us, public or private higher education establishment, public or private non-profit research organization, and international European research organizations. This is a definition of academic sector. The non-academic sector is definition by exclusion. Basically, any entity that does not belong to the academic sector is non-academic sector. And one thing that's important to note is that academic versus non-academic has nothing to do with public versus private. All right. It's more about the profit making or not, because you see that the private non-profit research organization is considered academic. And this is where the confusion comes from sometimes, where some entities think they are non-academic because they are a private non-profit research organization. But the fact that they're private doesn't mean that they're non-academic. So pay attention to that, because this is for the industrial doctorates, this is a requirement. So the eligibility conditions, it's a network. So of course you need to be several people, I mean several entities. You need to be at least 3 independent legal entities, each of them established in a different EU member state or associated country. And from these 3, at least 1 should be from an EU member state. Once you have this minimum, then you can add as many as you wish. Knowing that all beneficiaries must recruit at least 1 doctoral candidate. So you can have as many beneficiaries as you want, but of course, each of them has to recruit at least 1 doctoral candidate, so that limits the number. They have to host these fellows at their premises and supervise the fellows that they will recruit. Or they can use associated partners linked to them to do it. In order to have some balance in the geographical distribution within the network, because the idea is to have a European added value, you should not have more than 40% of the total budget to beneficiaries from the same country. So if you had, I don't know, a consortium of 7 partners and 5 of them are Irish, for instance, probably you would go above the 40%. So you need to take that into account. Just one thing is that it's about the EU contribution. So it's not about the number of fellows, because you will see later on that in the unit cost, the salary of the fellow is subject to country correction coefficient, just because the life in Sweden is more expensive than the life in Portugal, for instance. The budget per fellow will depend on the country. So don't just look at, it's not 40% of the number of fellows, it's 40% of the total budget. There are specific eligibility conditions for industrial and adjunct doctorates, which I will talk to you later about, and resubmission restrictions, as I already told you. So about JDs, you need to have in a consortium at least 3 participants awarding a PhD that is officially recognized as a PhD in their country, and one of them has to be a member state or an associated country. In the past, you needed 2 from a member state or associated countries. Now it's only 1. Each fellow has to be enrolled in a joint, double, or multiple PhD. So each and every one of them, it's important to note, you should have a letter of pre-agreement to deliver this joint, double, or multiple degree at the proposal stage. There's a template for that. And you can have up to 4 years of fellowship for each PhD students and 60 months for the network. For the industrial doctorates, I'm repeating myself, but it's at least 50% of the time of the fellow need to be spent in the non-academic sector. The non-academic sector entity could be as a beneficiary or as an associated partner. This comes from the fact that there is no secondment limitation. In the past, it happened that some non-academic institutions, they didn't want to be full beneficiaries. They wanted to be only associated partners. But in order to have the fellows at least 50% of their time within their institutions, there was a conflict with the maximum duration of secondment of 1/3. But there's none of this in the IDs. So it's possible to have, it could be possible to have all the non-academic partners as associated partners, and the fellows go there as secondment. But there should be joint supervision between the 2 sectors. So I told you about beneficiaries, associated partners. What does that mean? Just to tell you that when you're going to start submitting your proposal in SEP for submission and evaluation of proposals, in the system, the beneficiaries are called partners and the associated partners are called partners. So just don't get confused with that. So basically, what's the big difference between beneficiaries and associated partners? Beneficiaries, they sign the grant agreement and they recruit the fellows and they directly claim costs to the commission. Whereas the associated partners, they cannot recruit fellows, they don't sign the grant agreement, and they don't directly claim costs to the commission. When I say directly, it means that they indirectly can claim costs, because what happens is that the budget, the overall budget within the consortium can be redistributed as a consortium sees fit. So it's possible to channel some funding to the associated partners for the tasks that they do. For instance, if they organize training or they host secondment, they can get money from this institutional cost pot. So if you look at eligible participants, so who can participate? Basically, any legal entity from anywhere in the world can participate. So it's not restricted to Europe, but not all applicants are automatically eligible for funding. So you will have more explanation about that in the program guide. There are links to that in the guide for applicants as well, and also on the call page. But basically, to make a long story short, a third country, so meaning a country not a member state and not associated country to Horizon Europe, they can always participate. But to make a long story short, if it's a rich country, they have to pay themselves for the project. So if you have Japan, Switzerland, actually, We will not fund them, but they can participate. And if it's a third country that's medium, low to middle income country, then they can participate and get funded. All right, that's a big difference. So this is about the beneficiaries. For associated partners, there is no minimum, no maximum. They don't receive funding directly from us, so they could come from virtually anywhere. Okay. So EU countries, you know who they are. Non-EU countries, you have the associated countries to Horizon Europe. So that's the case, for instance, for Norway, Turkey, Israel. And you have the low and middle income countries. So in the Horizon Europe program guide, and I sent the slides to Jane. So this is clickable. There is a link there. So you can see the list of these countries. These can participate and get funded. If they're not in the list, it means that they cannot get funded. All right. So just to say again, Switzerland is not an associated country, at least for the time being. The UK is considered an associated country now for the 2024 call. Morocco is in the process of being associated, but it's not yet done. One thing that is important for you to know as well is that the fellows that are recruited in the doctoral networks, they should be enrolled in a PhD from a member state or an associated country. So that could limit a bit the international dimension of the network. So that means that if you have an entity from, let's say, Brazil, which I think is a middle income country, but I hope I'm not wrong, then they can participate, they can get funded, but the fellows they're going to recruit needs to be enrolled in a PhD from a member state or an associated country. So being enrolled in a PhD in Brazil is not enough. Now it's possible to have them in a double degree, for instance, Brazil and I don't know, Portugal, for instance. So this you should know about that. Now that we talked about the eligibility of the consortium, what about the researchers? And researchers, what we mean by that is the fellows that you're going to recruit later. So these fellows should be doctoral candidates. So what that means is that they should not already have a doctoral degree at the time of the recruitment. The recruitment should follow an open, merit-based, and transparent recruitment. And this can be audited, so you should be able to show and prove that the recruitment was not cooked, basically. And all the fellows should be enrolled in a doctoral program in at least one EU member state or associated country. The fellows can be of any nationalities. They don't need to be European. They can be from anywhere in the world, but they need to have moved. So there is a mobility rule. They should not have resided or carried out their main activity in the country where they are recruited for more than 12 months in the last 3 years. And that counts at the recruitment date, all right? So we have put in diagrams an example of consortia from a doctoral network, for instance. So you have here what looks like a Greek temple would be the academic world, and what looks like a small factory would be the non-academic sector. So you can see here that you have a mix of academic and non-academic beneficiaries from here, Turkey, Spain, Ireland, Norway, and you can also have associated partners linked to them. All the fellows need to be enrolled in a PhD. If you take the example of the industrial doctorates, so you see that all fellows need to spend at least 50% of their time in the non-academic sector, but the non-academic sector could be associated partners or beneficiaries, doesn't matter, but each fellow need to be enrolled in a PhD. Okay, and for the joint doctorates, here is another example, but all the fellows need to be enrolled in a joint, double, or multiple degree recognized in at least one EU member state. What do we mean by joint or double? It's pretty straightforward. A joint degree is a single diploma issued by at least 2 different institutions in 2 different countries. and recognized officially, obviously. And the double is just two separate diplomas. Multiple is more than two. So again, a letter of pre-agreement is in the proposal template. The proposal template is already available in the funding and tender portal at the call page. There's been some changes, some simplification in the proposal template, so I invite you to have a look at it carefully. But there's a history of change at the top, so that would guide you to where the changes are. Nothing drastic, a few simplifications that we've done. This is the overall summary. I don't think I will go through each and every line because this is basically what I already told you. So you can just have a look as a big summary of the eligibility conditions. How about the funding? So the funding is a simplified approach. So this has been around for many, many years. We have the unit cost approach. So basically, that means that when you're going, so say you're in an institution, you recruit a fellow, and what you will get is one unit cost per person month. So for each of your fellows that you recruit in the doctoral networks, you will get 1 unit per month worked. Okay, and it's 100% reimbursement rate. And you have different cost categories. And the cost categories are one part that goes to the fellow and one part that goes to run the project. So for the fellow, you have the living allowance, the mobility allowance that all fellows should get, because by definition, they had to move to take their position. Family allowance, if applicable. So if they are married, for instance, they can get this extra allowance. And then there is a part for the institution. So research, training, and networking contribution, 1,600 per month, and management and India contribution, 1,200 per month. Okay, so the part that goes to the fellow, all of that must go to the fellow. The institutional unit contribution, this is a part that can be redistributed within the consortium. And typically, the coordinator would get a bit more of this funding for their additional work in coordinating the project and things like that. How do we evaluate these proposals? Quickly, we receive the proposals and we check that they are eligible, so that they abide with the eligibility condition I told you about before. And then we perform the allocation of proposals to evaluators. Evaluators are external people that we give them a contract. They sign a confidentiality agreement, of course. We check their conflict of interest, well, more their absence of conflict of interest before we allocate them to any given proposal. And the first part of their work is that they assess the proposals individually. So each proposal is assessed by 3 different experts. They don't know who the 2 others are. They just work individually. And then when they did this individual work, comes the consensus group. So at that stage, the 3 experts, they need to agree to a common position and the common score for each proposal, right? So they could deviate from their initial thoughts. Sometimes they come from different disciplines. If it's an interdisciplinary proposal, they see things through different angles. So they talk, and then you have basically the evaluation summary report that you receive is the outcome of the consensus group. And then there is a panel review that happens at the end of the exercise with the experts. And basically there's a last check for consistency across the evaluation to check that all proposals have been treated the same way. And then you have the ranking list. And of course, we see how much each proposal requested as funding, and then when we run out of budget for the panel, we just draw the line. That's basically how it works. You have the award criteria here. They basically follow the structure of the proposal template. You have the excellence, impact, and implementation. They each have a weighting. So the score is about, each proposal is scored out of 5, but the final score is out of 100, and there's a weighing. So excellence counts more than impact, that counts more than implementation. How to apply? You go to the funding and tender portal, you go to the search engine, you type in doctoral networks, and you find the call page. So the 2024, it's not yet open. So if you want to submit something now, you cannot yet, but you will be able to do so in 21 days. There will be a guide for applicants available very soon. It's actually in consultation with the NCPs right now. The proposal template is available. It's inside, so you can see what it looks like. In the proposal template, you have also the instructions how to fill it in. You have the work program. You have the program guide that tells you which countries are eligible to get funded or not. And you also have all sorts of manual that explains you IT-wise where to click, how to do, how to submit your proposals. There's a page limit. So part A is something you fill in directly in the submission system. This is more an administrative part. And the part B is where you describe your proposal, and it's composed of two parts, part B1, part B2. It's explained in the proposal template, but there's a page limit for part B1. It's 30 pages. So don't go above the page limit because the system will just blank out the extra pages. So these pages will not be assessed. Even if the evaluators wanted to assess them, they don't see anything, so they cannot see it. One advice that I would like to give to you is after you've submitted, have a look at the proposal as it is in the system, because it happens that sometimes applicants realize that they forgot to upload something or they uploaded the wrong document. So have a last look. So you can still have a last look after you submit the proposal, of course, if it's before the call deadline. So I advise you to really have a look at that. Few tips. Obviously, read the work program and the guidance documents. Use the proposal template, the latest template. Read carefully the instructions inside. Have a look at the evaluation form so you can know on which basis you're evaluated. All parts of the proposal are important. It's a very competitive call because even though we have a large budget, there's a lot of proposals submitted each year. Write each section clearly and be coherent between the different sections. Give it to one of your peers to have a look at the proposal. Consult your national contact points, obviously, and don't leave it for the last minute. In the end, think like an evaluator, write for an evaluator. So if you would take your proposal and read it, how would you assess it when you read the evaluation forms? One last thing, we're going to organize, like last year, we're going to organize a central call info day. So that's a webinar on the 7th of June. So this will be recorded and will stay there, but you can send your questions to us as well using Slido. So all the questions will be answered during the presentation, and if we cannot answer everything, we will put that into an FAQ and make it available for everyone. So just a bit of a promotion. 7th of June, we have our central, when I say central, it means that we are organizing it, info day for the next call. There's a bunch of resources. I think there is no point in me reading about this. I think you need to click around to see what's at the other end of the link. A call for you to register in the experts database. If you register in the experts database, we can pick you as evaluators, but if you're not in the database, we cannot. Obviously, if you intend to submit a proposal, there is no point in registering as an expert because we will not pick you for the 2024 call. And thank you. I think I went a bit over time. Apologies for that.
Thank you very much, Julianne. That was a really comprehensive overview of the Doctoral Networks call, and you covered a lot of really pertinent and relevant information that applicants will need. This might be a good opportunity just to remind people that the webinar is being recorded, and all those registered will receive a link to the recording when it's ready. We will hold all the questions until the panel session a little later. Thanks everyone for your engagement so far, just grouping the questions at the moment, and you can enter any further questions into the Q&A function. I'm going to go now, though, to the first of our two case studies. And Sarah, I invite you to share your screen now. Professor Sarah Hudson has a PhD in biocatalysis from the University of Limerick. She was an MSCA Global Fellow awardee and was a postdoctoral researcher in Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Waterford Institute of Technology, now SETU, before securing an academic position in 2011 in the Department of Chemical Sciences at the University of Limerick, where she's also materials team leader and a principal investigator in the SSPC, the SFI National Research Centre for Pharmaceuticals. She is the coordinator for the ITN Industrial Doctorate Project, Long Act Now, which we will now hear more about. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today, and over to you.
Okay, thank you, Jane. So I'm sure someone will tell me if you can't hear me or anything like that. So thanks, Julian. I think you actually hit on a lot of the points that I'm going to make today. So as Jane said, I'm the project coordinator for Long Act Now. I apologize in advance because when I applied for this doctoral network program, it was called the ITN. So you'll see me or hear me use the word ITN a lot. This was a small program. Sorry, no. Yeah, so what I'm going to just quickly go through, like I said, the ITN EID, so it was the industrial doctorate form of a doctoral network program. I'm going to talk a little bit about the program as it was when we applied, which would have been, I think we would have submitted January 2019. And I'll talk about the constraints around it, the proposal preparation, the consortium management, a little bit about ESR, sorry, and again, these are the doctoral candidates. At the time, it was early stage researcher, so they're PhD students, and just a little bit on lessons learned. So Long Act Now, like I said, was an innovative training network or doctoral network training program, and it was one of the European industrial doctorates. It was actually a very small consortium we put together, and as it was my first time coordinating a project like this, it was actually really nice that it was small. The beneficiaries were the University of Limerick, then Janssen was the non-academic beneficiary, and the third beneficiary was Technical University Dortmund. And then Trinity College Dublin was an associated partner. So they didn't get resources, but they were heavily involved. Lydia Tajber from Trinity was heavily involved in co-supervising students and secondments to Trinity. Although this did happen, like I said, the students started in March 2020. So you can imagine there were some challenges in COVID times with secondments. So just here's just in the description of the call. Again, I think Julian has covered all these. There has to be at least 2 beneficiaries in 2 different member states. One beneficiary must be entitled to award doctoral degrees, and one beneficiary must be from the non-academic sector, and joint supervision is a prerequisite, and from what Julian said, is still a prerequisite. So that was the conditions that we had to put our application together under. I'm not going to talk about science, so I know this looks a little sciencey. This is about as much science as you'll see. But just to explain what Long Act Now, what our project was about, it was about developing kind of novel manufacturing platforms for long-acting injectable medicines for complex therapeutics. Ultimately, though, and again, I think Julian highlighted this quite well, these doctoral networks are about the PhD students. They're about training them. It's about giving them skill sets that will future-proof Europe and so as well Ireland as a knowledge base with ultimately the people that can carry out innovative work. So we only trained 5 PhD students, and the idea was to train them to address major challenges in the manufacture, formulation, and stability of long-acting medicines, and that the technologies that we would develop, that they would have the potential to be implemented in the pharmaceutical industry. So we had actually had some engagement with Janssen through the SSPC. As Jane said, the SSPC is the Science Foundation Ireland Research Centre for Pharmaceuticals that I'm involved in. Janssen approached us with a broad idea. We put a team together that would develop it into an overall research program. We did engage commercial writers. Quite frankly, they didn't really do a lot of the writing and didn't do a lot. They reviewed, again, as Julian recommended, it's always good to get fresh eyes on a proposal. So it was helpful to have them review it, but they couldn't write the science. They had limited understanding of what was feasible as well for us here in terms of activities and training. And really that had to come from the actual beneficiaries and the associated partners. And I'll talk a little bit about that shortly. I know Julian mentioned about management costs and how as the coordinator, you would get a portion. We took 50% of the management and overhead costs from each beneficiary to cover essentially employing a project manager, and it was the best thing we did. And this, I was quite nervous. I remember in our kickoff meeting in October 2019 in Belgium, you know, I was kind of saying, okay, I'm going to suggest this. And I was a bit worried. Again, it was my first project that I was coordinating. No partner had any problem with that. They were like, yeah, that makes sense. That's fine. So, so that was good. The other big shock I got, so we only had 5 PhD students. My original plan had been that 2 of them would be based in UL, would get their PhDs from UL, and so the resources for those 2 would come to UL. That was 2/5, and as Julian said, I didn't do my maths. I didn't look at the individual cost per country. And as I went to submit the proposal, I kept getting an error saying, you know, it wouldn't, my budget wasn't right. And essentially, by taking 2 out of 5 of the PhD students to Ireland, that put me at over 40% of the cost. So Ireland was actually more expensive for a PhD student than Germany or Belgium. So that was a problem. So I had to then have only the resources for 1 student come to Ireland, 2 went to Belgium and 2 went to Germany, which was a bit of a disappointment, to be honest, after all the work I had put in. But in the end, it didn't really matter because as you'll see in a minute, you know, we were all co-supervising the students. And so we all worked very well together. So the cost of living in Ireland negatively impacted the number of PhD students that Ireland could host relative to other countries. The other thing, again, Julian pointed out, we put together the consortium agreement. Trinity didn't sign the consortium agreement because they weren't a beneficiary, they were just an associated partner. That meant we also had to have secondment agreements in place, and there was a lot of work around developing the IP agreements. It was the first doctoral network European industrial training program that University of Limerick had done. So with our TTO office and legal, it took a lot of meetings and conversations to get those agreements to something that we agreed with and that the Janssen agreed with, that Trinity agreed with, and that Dortmund agreed with. So we didn't have templates. Now we have templates. So I would recommend that when you get to this stage, if your application is successful, that you go to your legal office or you find someone who has already, if they've already hosted or coordinated doctoral network programs, they will have templates available. They'll have had these conversations, and you really do not want to have to reinvent the wheel. The other thing I didn't realize was in Ireland, PhD students are not considered, they don't get contracts of employment, they get a stipend. But under the Marie Curie, because they're earning over 40,000 euros per year, they will be considered employees at your university. So they will have PhD student status and they will have staff status. So again, in our case, we had 3 PhDs at the University of Limerick, 2 PhD students at Dortmund. 1 UL PhD student was an employee at the University of Limerick. 2 UL PhD students were employees of Janssen, and 2 Dortmund students were employees at Dortmund. This is fine, but it does complicate your IP agreements, your secondment agreements, and even the consortium agreement. So there's a lot of legal language around that has to be clarified. The other issue that I, again, didn't anticipate is each of the PhD students are going to be getting different salaries. Now, I've written stipend here, but really they're getting a salary. And the PhD students talk. And that caused, because our students in the doctoral program, they spent 18 months, for example, at the University of Limerick and 18 months in Belgium. 2 students did the exact same amount of time in Belgium, the exact same amount of time in Ireland, and they're paid differently because one was resourced through Belgium and one was resourced through Ireland. And that caused some kind of upset between the PhD students because they talk and they found out they were getting different salaries, even though they were basically employed to do the same thing. The other thing I didn't realize, and we had to put it into the consortium agreement in advance, in Europe, for example, in Dortmund, students don't pay student fees to do their PhDs. They also don't have to pay access charges. So and so for the students that were resourced to Janssen, I had to invoice Janssen for the UL PhD fees, and also for any students that came on secondment, I had to invoice the two different beneficiaries to get their access charges, to get some of their research money to support their time in UL. So again, it's understanding that different universities in different EU states have very different institutional costs in terms of PhD students doing research. Again, all spent, and this is a prerequisite of the industrial doctorate program, 18 months at the non-academic beneficiary, 18 months at either the University of Limerick or Dortmund. And I saw a question earlier, some of the students were supposed to also spend time at Trinity. Again, with COVID, we ended up not doing that, but it was the intention to do it, and that was no problem. What I didn't anticipate was the challenges with visas and cost. We had 3 non-EU students. We had one from South America, one from Pakistan, and one from India, and then 2 from Europe. And the visa cost and the challenges. You have to also remember, Ireland is not in the Schengen. So that also introduces an extra layer of complexity in terms of visas and being able to travel between countries. There's lots of money to do the secondments. The money is not the issue. These PhD students are very well resourced, but the logistics, the housing, the visas, that really was a lot more problematic than I anticipated. And it was challenging for the students. Again, like I said, a lot of conversation around IP when we set out, but eventually it ended up all essentially as joint IP. But there was always a worry when a Janssen employee was in UL, or when a UL employee was in Janssen. There were lots of conversations around that and how the IP would work. And we had a very clear pre-publication strategy, which I'll talk about shortly. I'm conscious of time, so I'll speed up a little here. This would have been something that was in our application. The management structure that we used, you can see, remember, this is only for 5 PhD students. We had the coordinator, which was myself. We had an advisory board, a supervisory board, and a PhD student committee. We had a recruitment committee, a research committee, a training committee, and a data management committee. We said we would do a lot of meetings, monthly meetings, technical review meetings, consortium meetings, advisory board meetings, coffee mornings, journal club, etc., individual meetings with supervisors. What we actually did in reality was we did have all of these types of committee meetings, but we combined them into the Long Now monthly meetings. We combined the ESO, the PhD student committee meeting, into a virtual coffee meeting. And we actually had a really great consortium. We were very tight, we were very close, and it worked really well. Part of that, again, we had the academic investigators, but we got a lot of support from the behind the scenes, from legal, from tech transfer, and from in all the institutions, in Trinity, in Janssen, in Dortmund. And then Christy Sir here was our project manager. Again, it was a small consortium. We couldn't afford to employ a project manager full-time. We were lucky. Christy was actually project managing some other things for SSPC, and I was able to get her time for 1 day a week to work on this project for the course of the 4 years, which was really beneficial. One thing, again, I would say is really choose your partners carefully, because what you really want to do is have good partners who are really engaged with your program, and that will make everything easier. So we kicked off our project in October 2019. Apologies, I just need to get a drink of water. And as Julian said, we didn't have any PhD students in mind when we wrote the application or when we kicked off the project. At this kickoff meeting, we established the recruitment process, how we would advertise for PhD students, and this is just some of the examples. Deadlines for submission, the submission process. We did that through the University of Limerick learning platform at the time, which was Solus. And we ensured that we had fair and equal selection procedures. Again, what was really important was the joint supervision. It was really important to us that all of the supervisors joined in the recruitment process, because then they had a responsibility to that student. They felt engaged, they had buy-in, they had helped select the student, and they helped mentor and guide them over their 4-year course of their PhD. So then we evaluated the criteria. Mobility, again, I saw a question pop up. Some of the candidates that came in, so this is just some of our metrics we would have put in a report. You know, how many applicants we had, male, female, nationalities represented. Sorry. And then the awardee metrics. In our first call, we recruited 4 out of the 5 students. We actually had recruited a 4th one, but then eventually it was found by the EU that they did not meet the mobility criteria, and we had to go back out and advertise again. So it took a little bit of time. Again, data management, we used our UL, the Solus platform at the time, and we were able to give access to all of our partners to all of these folders, and this is how we worked. Open science, extremely important. Again, already raised by Julian. I just wanted to flag, you know, we used all of the university's policies from UL, from Dortmund, from the Horizon 2020 requirements, from European Commission Plan S guidelines, and we developed our consortium and RRP agreements, our data management plans, our pre-publication strategy, and our open science strategy. And these were all deliverables as part of our program. You can imagine having a project manager to do this essentially for us, or certainly support us in it, was just imperative. So I can't emphasize that enough. Just on that pre-publication policy, I won't go through this, but this was actually a PDF document that we developed for the consortium, all about background IP, had to be in writing, ownership of results, how do we define results. You have to remember that the EU also has the right of first refusal to the data generated in your project. And so you need to make sure that you notify the EU about when you're about to disseminate or publicize your work. Again, if there was an issue, we had developed this from the outset, and we would refer the students and the supervisors back to these simple 4 steps and make sure that everyone had to adhere to these before they could present at a conference, before they published, before they did anything. Very briefly, and I'm watching the time there, so I'm going to go very quickly. Again, doctoral training networks are about the PhD students. It's about those transferable skills. One thing I would say is what I did learn was that the PhD students in Ireland seem to get a lot more opportunities than the PhD students in Germany. And again, this came up, the students came to me, they were like, I'd love to do more outreach, more activities, more teaching. I'm not getting the opportunities. So it's a conversation worth having with your partners as you develop your proposal, and ensure that everyone realizes and is on board with that's an important aspect of the training for the PhD students. Again, all of the beneficiaries took ownership of different main training events and conferences, technical meetings, different workshops we did. So it was about dividing the workload. And that's important, again, as coordinator or the institution that's coordinating, you don't have to do everything, and you shouldn't be doing everything. It should be disseminated across all of the beneficiaries and partners. So then, just to wrap up, what did I learn? I didn't realize the secondment challenges. Now, obviously, we ran our project through the COVID years, 2020 to 2024. I saw a comment earlier. I participated in a Marie Curie Doctoral Network workshop at an EU level recently. I chaired a session about operational challenges. 3 years is very short to get a PhD student to get a full thesis written, especially if they spend 18 months in industry. I had the theses as a deliverable in my application. I wouldn't do that again. I think 2 of the students delivered their theses within 3 years. The rest of them delivered them within 4 years. The last one is actually just submitting this month. I actually signed off on the submission today. Our project officially ended March 31st, 2024. We did get a bit of an extension because of COVID, a no-cost extension. It's about what I didn't realize was the differences between student status, financial aspects and expectations at different institutions. And of course, the challenge, if you recruit non-EU students, there are challenges with visas and mobility in general. It was a brilliant first experience as an EU project coordinator with a tight group of researchers, but it was a small consortium. So I actually only ended up getting resources for one PhD student to myself at UL. But that said, I don't regret doing it. It was a brilliant networking opportunity. I have increased visibility on the European landscape. It's generated invitations to speak, publish, collaborate. And the PhD students are very heavily resourced and well paid, particularly compared to, for example, IRC students, as most of you will know. What really helped was constant and regular communication with the EU project officer, and nothing was ever really an issue. Institutional support, so your legal, your tech transfer, your student fees, all things like that really helped. And essential, get a project manager. It's worth paying the price to help you with all of this. And essentially that's it. So I will stop. This was the actual team. You can see us here. This was the first time we all got together. The picture up on the right was at a conference in Belgium, actually. And then these are some of the graduates from the program. So I will stop sharing.
Great.
Too far over time.
No, perfect. Thanks, Sarah, for sharing your experiences on in the course of your presentation. I think you answered some of the questions that were coming up, which was brilliant. And I love the last slide of the graduation of some of the fellows, and it really reminds us, I suppose, the overarching aim of this call is to train the next generation of PhD researchers. So thank you for that. And now for our second case study. Debbie, I invite you to share your screen and get set up while I introduce you. So Professor Debbie Ging is Professor of Digital Media and Gender in the School of Communications in Dublin City University. She teaches and researches on gender, sexuality and digital media with a focus on digital hate, online anti-feminist men's rights politics, the incel subculture and radicalization of boys and men into male supremacist ideologies. Debbie's research also addresses youth experiences of gender-based and sexual abuse online and educational interventions to tackle this issue. Professor Ging is the coordinator of the Participate Doctoral Network project, which we will hear about now. So very warm welcome to you, Debbie, and over to you.
Thanks for that, Jane. Hopefully my slides are visible. So I'm just going to talk through the first 2 years because we're midway through our project now, or almost midway through. So I'm going to talk through those experiences to date and just talk a little bit about the rationale for the project. So in the area of online bullying, we had identified a significant research gap in this space in that most of the research is about young people either as bullied or as bullies or bullying dynamics, but there's very little research about the role of parents in their children's experiences of online bullying. And that could be as educators, as role models, as bullies themselves in some cases, but mostly as agents of prevention and intervention. And as a result of this gap in the scholarship, we don't really know what parents need. So in terms of, where their different levels of knowledge are at, particularly with regard to technology, in terms of the types of teacher-parent interventions that are successful or possible, the kinds of resources that parents might need, what kind of safety apps might be useful for them, and in particular, what they need in terms of digital literacy to support their children. So the project was conceived as addressing a really significant gap in international scholarship in the online bullying space. I should also say from the outset that it's a resubmission. So I suppose the moral of the story is not to give up. It's worth reapplying, and we were delighted to reapply and be successful on the second attempt. So one of the things that we are trying to do with this doctoral network, I should as well say that it's a standard doctoral network, was to create interdisciplinary opportunities. This is quite a challenging starting point in some ways, because there are certain disciplinary orthodoxies in the bullying research, depending on whether you're situated in the field of educational psychology or in sociology or in internet studies or in gender studies. And these disciplinary orthodoxies obviously determine different kinds of methodologies. So some disciplines favor large-scale surveys, other in-depth interviews. And there are also theoretical, epistemological differences, which can be quite significant between scholars in this space in terms of how they actually conceptualize and define bullying, sometimes in what I would say are highly interpersonal terms that derive from psychological models, whereas my understanding or our understanding in sociology is a much more societal understanding of power and discrimination. And this can cause quite a lot of disagreement within the space. So from the outset, we were concerned with trying to challenge some of these orthodoxies and to create a truly interdisciplinary network that would expose the PhDs, the doctoral candidates, to different ways of thinking about online bullying, different ways to resolving their key research questions. So this is, I suppose, a very challenging starting point in many ways. But we put together a consortium that combines those different perspectives of people who are willing to work across disciplinary traditions in various different ways. So we have a relatively small group of beneficiary partners or team, with Dublin City University leading, and University of Stavanger, which is a major anti-bullying research hub internationally, being kind of second, I suppose, in terms of the number of doctoral candidates they have. We also have Aarhus in Denmark, the International Parents Association in the Netherlands, who are working together with University of Stavanger as a beneficiary partner. NKPU in Athens, and the University of Turku in Finland, which is also a major anti-bullying hub internationally. And then we have a set of non-academic partners, most of which are based in Ireland, which are Webwise, Feroiga, ISPCC, Dell Technologies, and then a youth charity in the UK. And Goldsmiths University became an associate partner because they were unable to remain as a beneficiary partner because of Brexit. So they're hosting an academic secondment, but they're not beneficiary partners in the network. So that's basically our network. So the project started in September 2022, and by September 2023, we had recruited all 10 doctoral candidates. And to reiterate what Sarah said and her experience of the recruitment process, it may seem like a long time, but in fact, a year is a really, really short time to get all of your DCs recruited, because of the need to centrally coordinate the recruitment process between all the partners, but also because it just comes, it happens very quickly. And if you have any kind of glitches, like, for example, a candidate is deemed ineligible, particularly if somebody you appointed, or your first ranked candidate is offered the position and then declines, you can suddenly have quite significant setbacks, particularly because we're all working through our institutional HR departments, which adds further delays onto this. And any late start for the candidates means that they're going to be short of funding, because the funding starts, they have to be recruited and start earning a year after the project starts. So the timeline is really important, and it's really important to try and be ahead of yourself to preempt any kind of setbacks or issues like that. So the structure of our standard doctoral network is that each of the 10 DCs is registered in one of the beneficiary partner universities. We have 3 in DCU, and then the others are spread out between the other beneficiary partners. So Stavanger has actually got 4. They've got more than us, even though we're leading. And then the others are in Turku, Athens, and Denmark. So that's the kind of basic model. And then all of them will do an academic secondment in one of the other universities, and all of them will do a non-academic secondment in one of the charity or corporate associate partners. And each of those secondments is between 3 and 4 months. So it's basically a semester. So again, when you're applying and you're planning out timelines, this is really important. We didn't really think this through, and we put all the non-academic secondments before the academic secondments. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure when I think back to the logic of this. We've ended up changing them, swapping them all around so that the DCs go on their academic secondment first. So nearly all of them are going this September 2024. Not all of them, but nearly all of them. And then they'll do their non-academic secondment a year later in 2025. And obviously this makes much more sense because, you know, during the academic secondment, they're getting training in methodology. They're doing modules in the, you know, abroad that will give them ECTs, but they're getting kind of still training in methods and interviewing methods, etc., things that are still important to their field work. By the time then that they go non-academic secondment, they have skills and knowledge, and hopefully also some findings that they can bring to the associate partners while they're doing their internships with them. And, you know, I suppose they're more fully rounded and they have more to give. So swapping those around was extremely bureaucratically difficult. It's not a problem with the project officer. We have an amazing project officer in Brussels, and she's really flexible and grants us a huge amount of leeway and is very positive and supportive. But every change that you make to the description of the action has to be really meticulously documented and justified, and this is extremely time consuming. And while we also pay a project manager to do a lot of our administrative work, this is the kind of thing they can certainly help you with, but because the PI really has such an overview of the entire project, this is the kind of thing that takes up a lot of my time, and I really wished we had put more thought into how we arranged the chronology and the timing of the project when we were writing those details. So that's really important, because if you can avoid it, you do not want to go back and have to change those things. So that's the basic structure, is that they will have an academic secondment abroad and a non-academic secondment as well as that. And the other big, I suppose, component of this doctoral network is the network-wide training events. So we've already had a winter school in Stavanger this February, which was really successful, a week-long winter school where, you know, there was various training and methodology, but the most important component of that was a communicating science to the public training element, which took up nearly a half of every day, where they worked with media professionals to actually communicate complex ideas about their research and their, you know, the theories behind them and the research problem to a lay audience, and then worked on video recordings and presenting their work then at the very end of that to all of us as short 3-minute video recordings, and then got feedback. So as well as learning how to communicate science to a lay audience and to you know, to perform in front of the camera, I think it was also a very important kind of team building and confidence building process for them, because the idea of having to present their work to us, you know, via video was quite terrifying for most of them. So it was a major milestone, and they were really delighted that they'd kind of gotten over that, and obviously then a kind of a bonding process as well. And they've also done a week of training in building strong family school partnerships in Amsterdam with the International Parents Association. That was the following month in March. So we've 2 major network-wide training events done already. In September, we all go to Athens for 3 days, where they will do a 2.5-day training on how to deal with stakeholders, so how to deal with NGOs. And the partner there is bringing in some migrant organizations to train the DCs in those kinds of skills. And then next August, we'll hold a week-long summer school in Dublin. So those are our major network training events. In addition to that, we obviously have lots of conferences, smaller symposia, workshops, online training possibilities as well. But that's the kind of basic structure of the network. So all 10 DCs are recruited, and they're all well into their studies, their research, their, you know, writing their literature reviews, planning their field work at the moment. And so far, so good. They all seem to have settled pretty well. So our project is built around 8 work packages. As you can see, DCU is leading 4 of those. So we're leading the management and coordination. And then we have 4, if you like, academic work packages, each of which takes a major kind of thematic strand within the project. So looking at the impacts of online bullying, one is looking specifically at parents and teachers and that kind of relationship between those in intervention and communication around bullying. The work package I'm leading is focused on technology, social media, and online bullying and parents. Stavanger are leading one then on societal and cross-national aspects of bullying. In addition to those 4 academic work packages, we then have a training work package, which has been led by Greece, and they have oversight of all of the training and secondment modules and ECTs that the DCs take. We have another partner who's leading on dissemination, exploitation, communications. So they've set up the website, and they look after our quarterly newsletters and all our communication deliverables. And then we have an ethics work package, which is also based in DCU. So that's the work package overview. So we have a really super multinational consortium. We really have fulfilled the criteria in terms of mobility. So we have our DCs come from China, Russia, India, Pakistan, 2 from Turkey, 2 from Italy, 1 from Hungary, and 1 from Portugal. And each of those then will do their non-academic secondment in Ireland, Stavanger, Aarhus, Amsterdam, Athens, or Turku. So there's a lot of mobility. There's a lot of issues with visas, as Sarah mentioned. And again, we hadn't really anticipated how long some of those applications can take, and we hadn't anticipated how much they cost in the case of non-EU DCs. So that's something to bear in mind. So for example, 2 of our DCs who are non-EU were not able to attend the Amsterdam training in March because they couldn't get their visas in time. So these things can present significant problems. So luckily, the Dutch partner made the training available to them online and gave them the resources, so they'll still get ECTs for completing the assessment work associated with that module. But, you know, they had to come up with a flexible solution for this. So the visa issue is considerable. Another thing I would say, this is just some of our deliverables. And as Sarah said, don't make your PhD, your actual PhD is a deliverable. We didn't. It's one of the things I guess I would also concur with you make them a milestone rather than a deliverable. But that said, we probably have overreached a little bit. These are just some of our deliverables. They're the main ones that will be produced by the work packages. But we have promised a lot. So there's a huge amount of work for the DCs in addition to their PhDs and in addition to the scientific publications, the journal articles that they produce, are also going to be working on these resources. And while I think they're really important, we probably have put in a few too many, and we will deliver on them, but it's going to be a lot of work. So project website, project handbook, very obvious tools that everybody needs to communicate internally and externally. The scientific publications per work package, I think we will have 7 journal articles per work package minimum. But then we have much more pragmatic outputs. So we're going to be producing parent toolkits, digital safety guidelines for parents, particularly around issues like algorithmic literacy that parents are struggling with, trying to understand why their children might go down particular rabbit holes or get into extreme or toxic communities online. So those kinds of toolkits we feel are very important, and will draw on the findings of the DC's research as well, because obviously they're going out talking to parents or surveying parents in terms of what they need and where they feel they have significant knowledge gaps. We're also producing a number of reports that will be policy oriented on the status of parent-teacher school cooperation across different countries in Europe, a report on the current and future state of parents' needs for digital media literacy, report on parents' diversity and methodological issues in cross-national bullying research. So some of it is quite qualitative and goes quite deep, and then some of it is using much bigger data sets to try and look comparatively at what's happening across Europe. And then we will wind up with a public talk for parents. So we haven't decided if that should happen here or if we should try and replicate that in each of the beneficiary partner countries. So it's quite a lot of deliverables. And again, maybe a word of warning is not to overpromise. I've said there, yeah, don't overpromise. So
Debbie, just to interrupt, because I'm just watching the clock here. I know we're tight on time, and I didn't want to interrupt you with the deliverables, but we are going to circulate the slides if that's okay afterwards. So I know we're reaching your last slide now and the lessons learned. If it's okay with everyone, could I invite the panel back just to answer a couple of questions that have come in? If that's okay, Debbie, I'll ask you to stop sharing. And thank you very much for that reminder about when you're at proposal stage to think about the implementation stage and how it's all going to work. Thank you for the panel for coming back, and there was a lot to get through, and I really appreciate everyone's time here. And some of the questions came to us at registration, and I might start with some of them. Julian, if I can start with you first. And Debbie mentioned her application was a resubmission, and the 2023 calls, there were very high cutoff rates, I suppose. The success rates was lower. And I'm wondering, would you have any data on the success rates of resubmissions, or any advice you would have for people who are considering resubmitting?
Yes, sure. So we do not have statistics on the funding, on the success rate of primo submission or resubmission. I mean, we don't have clear statistics. We didn't do that, but there seems to be an advantage for resubmitted proposals, probably because they went through already at least one round of evaluation, and they could fix, so to speak, or maybe not fix, but improve their proposal based on the feedback that they had from the evaluators. And that would probably be the best advice to give to applicants who had their application already rejected in the past, to really read with with an open mind, the most open mind possible, the drawbacks identified by the evaluators, and try to address them in the resubmitted proposal. That would probably be the best advice to give.
Great, good advice there. And we also encourage people to try and treat the proposal as a new one, if you like. State of the art might have moved on, and we know the evaluators won't be the same. Julian, can I ask you, do the evaluators, will they get a look at the previous proposal that was submitted, or
No, they don't. So the idea is that, I mean, the mantra is that each proposal is evaluated as it stands. So they do not get the previous proposal. What they do get is they have access to the previous evaluation summary report. So the idea is that it's not that they will compare, the new proposal with the previous one and see the matching with the evaluation summary report, but it provides an additional, let's say, quality check, if you will, meaning that if they see that there's something that is quite different from the previous submission, if there's an assessment that is contradicting a previous assessment, then they don't see the previous proposal, but they check again in the current proposal whether this assessment still stands, or whether maybe, I don't know, something was overlooked or too quickly discussed, or things like that. So it's actually additional information to make sure that the proposal is fairly evaluated, but there is no comparison between the previous proposal and the current proposal.
That's great. That's very clear. Thank you for that. We're just going to have a Q&A session for a couple of more minutes. I hope everyone can stay with me. There's a couple of questions have come in. Julian, if I can stick with you for a question about the interdisciplinary aspect of proposals, and I think Debbie touched on this, and Sarah as well. But when applicants are picking a panel, scientific panel, what would your advice be in picking the best panel to suit their project?
Yes. So I mean, so the panel depends on so we have a list of keywords that are also called descriptors, where you have a number of these descriptors for each panel. And the thing is that when applicants pick a panel, the first descriptor they have to pick should belong to that panel. And then from the second descriptors onwards, they have to pick at least 3, and maximum, I think, 12, if I'm not mistaken. So they can pick a lot. Then they should really see what is maybe the biggest, I mean, the first keyword that matches best their proposal, or the biggest part of their proposal, and see in which panel this is. Now, having said that, what I can tell you as well is that the evaluators are not siloed in panels. Actually, the evaluators are shared to a great extent between the different panels. So we tag the evaluators to a panel. How that works is that we actually ask the evaluator to pick the same kind of descriptors that applicants pick. So they have to rate them with different grades, perfect knowledge, average. So there's a kind of grading. And this, so they can pick keywords from different panels. And we're going to tag them to all the panels for which they indicated 100% of accuracy in the descriptor. So we have a lot of experts. If they are interdisciplinary, we have some experts which are tagged to 2 or 3 different panels. So what I mean by that is that if you have an interdisciplinary proposal and you submit it to, I don't know, for instance, engineering, it doesn't mean that you will only have the evaluators from engineering. You will have the evaluators that are multidisciplinary, so it's possible to have proposal in engineering evaluated by an expert from, I don't know, chemistry, physics, engineering, because they are not siloed in a panel. So when we allocate the proposal, and we have a process in which actually it's a subset of evaluators, we call them the vice chairs. So those are peers actually who allocate proposals to experts to be sure that, you know, they have also more background than us, you know, to allocate proposals to the experts. They have access to the full pool of evaluators from all the panels. So wherever you put your proposal, you can be reassured that you will have the appropriate experts. Now, one thing you might be concerned about is maybe the different success rate between the different panels. So the budget for each panel is a measure. It depends on how many eligible proposals are in the panel. So basically, success rate should be the same. I mean, it should be the same if all proposals cost the same. Obviously, that's not the case, but that should not create a bias. And actually, if you look at so at the end of each evaluation, we publish this percentile table that shows you the cutoff for each panel. And those are not exactly the same, but they are relatively close one another. I mean, if you see, of course, I opened it and then I closed it in the meantime. But if you see between the different panel, the cutoff is something between 95 and 97. But, you know, you don't have a situation where in a panel, the cutoff is at 80 and the other one is 98. It's relatively constant. And also, you know, it's competition. So the value, I mean, the score as such has meaning, yes, but it's basically your relative position with the other anyway. So, yeah.
That's very clear, and really emphasize the importance of the keywords and thinking about that. I might turn to our case studies now. And I suppose one of the things that really comes across is that exposure to non-academic environment is really important. And that's not just industry, but it's civil society organizations and obviously industry as well. I'm wondering, could I maybe start with you, Debbie? Because it struck me in your network, you had a number of civil society organizations and non-academic organizations. Was it difficult to convince them to become involved, or can you maybe tell us a little bit about how they became involved?
It wasn't actually. They were incredibly positive and willing to come on board, even at a very late stage in the case of one. And they've also been remarkably flexible and generous in terms of, we've had one change in terms of a secondment. So for various reasons that are too complex to go into, but our DC is at very short notice has gone to ISPCC, and that meant taking on an extra internship or secondment on their part, and they did it at very, very short notice. So she's actually out on secondment at the moment. But I think one of the reasons for this is because our 3 DCU-based DCs are housed in the Anti-Bullying Centre, and the Anti-Bullying Centre has obviously built up a huge network of, you know, relationships with these stakeholders over many years, decades even. So there's, you know, there's a network, there's a relationship there, and it makes it much easier for us to draw on that goodwill and those relationships. It also makes it a lot easier for our DCs because they belong in a community. They are physically located in the Anti-Bullying Centre, and they're working with a network of other PhDs and doctoral researchers. Again, I think that's something to think about. If you can draw on that kind of those kinds of institutional resources and histories and networks and relationships, it's very, very beneficial, and it makes them feel that they're really part of something. Whereas if they were up here on my campus, they might feel a little bit more isolated, I think. So, you know, again, those are the things we're thinking about. And yeah, if you have a centre or you have a network to draw on those relationships is really beneficial.
Great, thanks, Debbie. And Sarah, I wonder about, you mentioned in your presentation that industry had approached you as the initial idea, but did you have any difficulties convincing companies to become associated partners, or what were really the benefits for industry to be involved?
I suppose, no, I mean, I was lucky. Janssen are very research orientated industry. I mean, their campus in Bierse, I say campus, their manufacturing site in Bierse is actually feels nearly like a campus. You know, it's And so like there's a lot of industries, certainly in my area, which would be in pharmaceutical, who are very active in research and development. And I suppose it gave them, the research centre I'm in has a long track record of engaging with industry. They knew we had that good track record of collaborative type projects. So I think they had confidence that we could collaborate in a safe way with them, because obviously with industry, IP becomes a little bit more challenging. But because we already had built trust and have done it for 15, 16 years now, they already had that trust built. So I would say it's a little bit of a challenge if it's a very new industry partner to have that trust about the IP and things like that. I mean, I think we have a established track record from a research perspective in an area that they are not don't have a vast amount of experience in. So that was why they wanted to partner with us, because we could bring expertise to the table. And then also, I mean, they've hired, again, they've hired one of the PhDs that came out of the program as an employee. They wanted to hire another one, but because, and again, this I suppose is a learning, because they had already had a contract with Janssen, it made it more difficult for Janssen to hire them again, whereas they were able to hire the PhD that actually had the contract with UL. So they wanted to hire more of them, but then they couldn't because of employment laws in Belgium. I suppose the cost of hiring them would have been higher.
Yeah, great. And I suppose we mentioned about the importance there, the non-academic involvement. We know it's crucial, and just to you've reminded me there that our office has some promotional material designed for industry and civil society organisations. So I might attach that to the link for the recording for everyone, if it's useful for talking with partners, just to remind them of the benefits of taking part. We had a great question that came in, and I'll put it to both you, to both Debbie and Sarah, about how long does the application take to write? And I don't know. It's a little bit like how long is a piece of string, I suppose. But would you have an idea of how many months it took to develop the proposal?
I could say from my perspective, I would say you would need to give it at least 4 or 5 months. And I lost Christmas 2018. You know, that was just the way it went. You know, but mine was smaller. So again, Debbie's might have a different perspective.
Yeah, I would agree. It's definitely a matter of months. And we also applied for Enterprise Ireland pre-award funding so that we could pay somebody from the Research Project Administration office here in DCU to help us write it. So they did all the horrible bits that I can't deal with, like budgets and Gantt charts and things like that. And that was massively helpful. But even still, yeah, I mean, it's probably 3 or 4 months. Even with that assistance, and still, you know, if I was going back to do it again, I would be much more, I would pay an awful lot more attention to the timings of things, and to, you know, to the timings of the recruitment and the secondments. Even just aligning your secondments is, you know, for us is really important, because it means with the housing crisis that and we had to realign them, but you know, it means now that they can swap accommodation in some cases, which is really helpful. But I didn't really think of things like that, because you're so up against it time-wise. But those kind of practical things are really important and take time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know this application is not going to get written in a weekend. It might explain, Julian, why we're so early with our webinar this year. So it always, time is the enemy when it comes to writing these proposals. You mentioned Enterprise Ireland support, and Yvonne has just put up the link on the chat function there. So we'd really encourage any coordinators leading a doctoral network based in a higher education institution in Ireland to apply for that doctoral network support. Myself and Yvonne are available to meet potential coordinators to discuss their proposal as well. Another question has come in, Julian. I might pose this one to you about the industrial doctorate. And the industrial doctorate, as you explained, has the 50% mandatory exposure to industry that the person has to fulfill. But can the researcher then go on to come into an academic organization, or does they have to keep within industry?
Oh, no. I mean, the rule says they have to spend at least 50% of the time in the non-academic sector, but once they, tick that box, I mean, they can go on secondment to other entities that could be academic. Yes, of course.
Great. So there is a bit of, I suppose, flexibility there in how the I suppose how you're designing the network and particularly the secondments. I'm conscious of time, so what I might do is draw this session to an end. I want to very much thank everyone for joining us and staying with us until the end. We're 15 minutes ahead of time, but it was actually packed full of information. Apologies, Debbie, for cutting short that last slide on the lessons learned, but I'll make sure it's included. And I know you finished with the importance of, you mentioned on that slide, the importance of communications, and it is all about communications. And do follow up with myself and Yvonne. If any of the questions people posed weren't answered, we'd very much like to tease things out a bit further. So thank you to our panelists for giving their time today and sharing their knowledge and their experience with us. As mentioned before, the recording of today's webinar will be made available on our web pages on iua.ie, and it's also be sent to you in an email with the link to the recording. And you can access previous webinars on our IUA webpage as well. And thank you also for Julian reminding us that there will be a commission organised event on the Doctoral Networks call on the 7th of June, which will also be a great opportunity to increase our knowledge, and the call will have formally opened then, and the application templates will be available by then. So that is the end of our webinar for 2024. I wish you all a very pleasant day, and goodbye for now.